Many of you have arrived on time. That's great. All right, everyone. Welcome to Finding Your Brand Voice, a webinar put on, well, by Marmalead with our creative director, Jade. So I'm Richie from Marmalead. We have Jade from Marmalead and Gordon from Marmalead with us today. We're very excited to hear more about branding. Branding is a big thing when you're selling really anything. As long as you have a business, even a personal brand, branding is a huge thing. And if you are selling on Etsy, which many of you are since you're our customers, having a brand voice is so important to set yourself apart and really get across the message you want. But that is where I will stop as far as talking about brand, and I will turn that over to Jade.
Thank you. Super excited to be here and be actually having a webinar on the creative side of everything. I'm really excited about it. So first of all, I just want to let everybody know that one of the reasons why we decided to do this webinar was to just give you guys a more broad view of what it looks like to brand yourself, brand your shop. And I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I know being a graphic designer that a lot of times especially when you're first starting out, and sometimes even when you're kind of far down the road in your business, branding and like getting a good logo that looks really professional can be hard and it can be costly, which you definitely get what you pay for. But I do think that when you're first starting out, and maybe if you're still working up in your business, kind of building it up, there is a way that you can brand yourself so it looks professional. It doesn't look like you've got some blurry pixelated image in your shop or like in your emails. And there's a good way to do that. And so I'm very passionate about that. I'm passionate about good design. I think there's way more bad design out in the world than there is good design. And I'm passionate about logo design in particular, which is why I created a course on how to design and brand yourself in Canva, which is a free tool online. So I've got this course out there. It is available just so that everybody knows that from the start. And I hope that you guys will check it out. It was definitely a labor of love for me. So I'm really excited about it. But I want everybody to know, starting off, that one of the things that I hate the most is when you sign up for a free webinar and all they do is pitch their course the entire time, and you're like, well, great, I have gotten nothing out of this. Thank you very much. You've just wasted an hour of my life. So I want everybody to know right away, we're not going to be doing that. We are actually today going to be going through the steps that I take my clients through when I take on a design client. And it's how to find your brand voice. And so we're going to be walking through all of those questions today. And at the end of the webinar, if you stayed through all the questions, we do have a free gift for you. So I hope that you'll stick around because it's a pretty cool gift, I think. And so, yeah, that's what today is about. We're going to be walking through the steps and the questions that I take my clients through exactly. So we can just jump right in and start. Did you guys have any questions before I get started, Richie and Gordon?
I don't think so. Sounds fantastic.
Okay, so just to start off, in case anybody's wondering, what is this brand voice thing? What does that mean? What does that look like? I know a lot of people ask me that when I have a client, they'll say, okay, I don't know where to start. I don't even know what we're going to be doing. Well, that's not a problem. We're going to go through these steps. And so I actually schedule a call with them just like this. We'll do a video call. So I'm basically just doing exactly what I do with my clients. So what I would tell them is that if you've never heard of this before, in a nutshell, a tone of voice or your brand voice, it embodies and expresses the brand's personality instead of values. Right? So it's about the people or the person that make up the brand. So if you're a one-person shop, this is all about you. If you've already got people working with you as a whole, you would look at your company and say, okay, what do we embody and what are our values? And what does that look like? So the thing that drives you guys, your love, your hates, what you want to share with the world, basically what you're doing is through your brand, you're cultivating a story. You're saying, this is the story I have, and this is how I want to communicate it to the world, and that's done through your brand voice. It's about what you're trying to communicate to your customers and your audience. And so from there, you would say, how am I going to communicate that? What does that look like? What is the story that I'm writing, cultivating? What does that what does that look like as far as my company and my shop go, if you're specifically an Etsy shop. And this is really exciting. I mean, I love this process. I think it's really beautiful, and I'm excited to walk through all of that with you. So basically what I would start off with is my clients, I would send them their homework. And so I would send them a PDF of these questions, and they're a very specific set of questions that I go through before I'll even consider beginning the design process for them. So what I would say is that if you are going to go through the course, or if you're going to just stick through and listen to the webinar, the first thing you want to do when you're looking at your brand, if you've never done this before, is say, how am I going to walk through these steps? And at the end, what is that going to look like for me? So this is what you're going to want to do yourself. You're going to want to go through these questions and say, okay, what does this look like for me? So I'm not going to be there to walk through all of these with you. I will in the webinar, but afterwards, if you're taking notes or whatever, just think about specifically what these questions mean to you. And so this is what I would call your homework. This is basically what we're going to be walking through. And you would have to fill this out and get it back to me before I would even consider starting a logo, because you can't go off of nothing. And I think that's the problem when you're designing for yourself, if you've never done it before, is that people just are like, I went on Canva and I got a template, and they smack it up somewhere and that's what they go with. And a lot of times it's not personal. It's like, okay, well, that tells me nothing. You've got an orange square with some letters. What does that mean? What is that communicating to me? I don't know. So I think it's really important to think about who you are, who your company is, and communicate that through your logo and your brand overall. And as a designer, this is all part of doing your research and making sure that what I give back to my client is unique to them. So that would be what you want to do as well for yourself. You'd want to do some research. Look at other Etsy shops in your genre. Like if you're selling jewelry, go out and look at some Etsy shops and see what kind of logos do they have. You don't want to copy them. That's what's going to make you stand out the most, is doing some research. And so if I had taken on a client and they were a tech company, for example, I would go into the area that they're basing out of, and I would start doing research on other tech companies. If every other tech company is some shade of blue, I'm probably going to stay away from that. I want to do something different for them. So that would be the first step, is just making sure that you're doing your research and you're not accidentally copying someone or kind of blending into the crowd. You definitely don't want that. You want to stand out in your market. And you especially want to stand out in your market on Etsy, right? That's the whole deal, is that we're trying to get you found. And so part of that is branding really well. And so before we actually start on the first question, I want you guys to remember that as you go through these, there's actually not a perfect answer. Everybody's going to be different, and this is not something to stress out about. It's not for all the type A'ers out there. This is not anything that's supposed to be perfect. That's the thing about design and branding. It's very subjective. So don't freak out or feel like there's a perfect answer, because there isn't. And so the first question that I would start off with is, let me get over here. What idea or thought do you want customers to clearly associate with your business? So what idea or thought do you want customers to clearly associate with your business? And so then I would have a little example that would say, if they know anything, I want them to know that, fill in the blank. Then you would enter the name of your particular business, since I don't actually know what that is. So right under the initial questions, I always have that. If you know anything, you want them to know that what does that blank mean to you? That I'm fun, that I'm sassy, that I'm more dark and moody, because we see that too. This is what the first question always is. And this is where I'd want you to start mulling over what your brand voice is, because that would be the first thing. Like, what are you communicating in that one word? Are you funny? Are you sarcastic? That would be the first question.
I feel like health food brands do a really good job of doing that. You know, because they kind of, and also with the logos and the colors and stuff like that, they jump out. You're walking, you know, you're looking at mac and cheese, and there's the stuff you're used to, and then you see the Annie's, and there's like a rabbit looking at you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And their stuff is organic or it's healthy, and they point out this stuff. So if there's one thing I'm not sure if it's what they want me to know, but it's the thing I feel like I know is this is the healthier brand to buy. So if I'm going to
Right.
want to feel better about giving this to my kids, I'm going to buy this Annie's mac and cheese.
Yeah, definitely. And the great thing that Annie's done, and it's true of several different brands, McDonald's being one of them. I mean, what pops up into your head as soon as I say McDonald's?
Big Mac.
Sure, yes, yeah, Big Mac. But what, like, you can see their logo, right?
Yes, the golden
Yeah,
arches.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Like and Annie's has done the same thing. I feel like I know Annie's really well. I actually buy a lot of Annie's, and that little white rabbit, it just pops right out. And
Yep.
yeah, so they do a really good idea, or a really good job of having that idea of like, okay, here's our logo, here's what the image you're going to see, but they do a great job of communicating who they are as far as words go as well. That's really
Yeah.
awesome.
When they're up against another product, it's hard to pick up the other product instead of theirs, right?
Right. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
yeah,
All you got to do is read the ingredients. So it's like, yeah. And plus
yeah,
their branding overall is just more appealing,
it is.
I
And
think.
it's pretty
Yeah.
simple. I feel like it's pretty simple
It
branding.
is.
Like they don't cram a lot in there. I feel
Yep.
like, call it white space, but I feel like most of the boxes. So I'd pretty much shop in the mac and cheese. I don't know if
All about mac and
they
cheese.
make something else, but pretty much the mac and cheese. And I feel like the box is normally like a purple or something. So I'd say it's a good use of white space, but it
Yeah.
tends to be purple. But they don't put a lot on there. What they put on there, I feel like tends to be pretty big, but it also seems to be pretty impactful. And I feel
Yeah.
like that kind of stands out because the other brands, the craft and whatnot, I feel like there's just kind of a lot of busyness going on.
Yeah, and that's also a really great point that we should cover, and we can do that really quickly, is that good design and good branding does not mean that you have to cram everything in. You actually don't want to do that. The more simple, the better. When I'm designing, I'm always going to try to keep it more minimalistic than really busy, because that can just be confusing. Then it's like, okay, you're trying to tell 10 different stories, and really you should just be telling one. So yeah, I think that you guys definitely, when you're starting the branding process and thinking about your logo, it does not need to cram everything in there. Really, the more simple, the better. That's definitely true, because otherwise you overwhelm people, and then it's going to be hard for people to remember because they're overwhelmed with what your logo is. And I've seen that before. I see it a lot. I feel like I've seen it a lot more on Etsy since I've been working with Marmalead, where I'll see somebody who's very excited because they've had a custom logo done, like a watercolor logo, and it's literally like this very, very busy picture, which sometimes you can make it work, but a lot of times, I mean, even it can be beautiful. It's a beautiful picture, but it's not really like a logo is, it's your mark. And so it doesn't need to have so much crammed into it that you overwhelm people and they can't remember what it is. So that's a great point, Richie, that really you should just keep it more simple, I think, as a designer, for sure, than too busy. And companies like McDonald's and Annie's have done a great job of that.
Agreed. Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so the second question that I would move into with my clients is, what words would you use to describe the personality of your customers and your audience? Okay, so this is something really important to think about as you're starting the branding process, because what you're trying to do when you think about who your audience is and what their personality would be like is you're trying to create an emotional connection with them, which is what you
Frozen.
want. You want to be emotionally connected to your clients and your audience, because that's what's going to bring them back again and again and again. And a great example that I like to think about is, because I think that their branding is genius, is Coke. They've done a great job of branding. I feel like throughout the years, they really try to connect with their audience. And so as you look kind of, they've definitely changed over the years, but right now I see it a lot in the movie theater. They're always branding right, or they're always advertising right before movies. So what I've noticed is that Coke is now saying, hey, we're more down to earth. We're family friendly. We're relatable. We're cool. We're intelligent. And they've had to kind of rebrand, because now they're branding to a market that's more millennial, who's like, we want to drink healthy things. We don't want to drink just the traditional Coke anymore. So then they've had to kind of go off and create new products, which they've got a ton. that millennials will consume, because I think like the normal Coke drink has actually dropped a ton in the last few years. I've got an uncle who was really high up in Coke, and he's like, dang millennials, the Coke drink has actually dropped a ton. And so what they did was they went back and they redid their product, and now they offer Coke Life, which is Coke with sweetened with stevia. You guys ever had that or heard of it?
No, I
In
haven't.
a green can, yeah. And so that it also brings up another really good point, is that as you're thinking about your audience, you can change with your audience. So what I would like to remind everybody before we get too far into this is that the branding process and going through these questions is not set in stone, and it actually shouldn't be. You should come back and review these questions, I would say once a year, and say, okay, has my audience changed? If it hasn't, awesome. If it's doing well, keep going with it. But that's just the nature of human beings in general. We're going to change, and so should your brand to keep up with your market and your audience. So kind of have to do what Coke did and go back and say, okay, who's my audience? How have they changed? Do I need to make any changes? And do I need to market differently because of the changes that has happened in my audience? So something that you need to
Yeah.
constantly think about and understand, that branding is never set in stone. It's subjective, and it has to change with the times. That doesn't mean that you want your logo changing with the times, right? There's a difference. Coke's logo has changed very minimally through the years, but the way that they market and their brand itself has definitely changed and evolved with their audience. So it's something really good to remember. And Coke's a huge company, but on a smaller scale, even in your Etsy shop, it absolutely 100% applies. If you're a business owner and you're selling something and you have a brand, it doesn't matter if you're small or big, the principle is still the same with this, that you have to be aware of your audience and change with them. But that does not mean your logo. So there is a difference, right, between
Speaking
your
of
actual
logos,
brand.
sorry there.
No, go ahead.
Like the delay, I gotta be careful there. Logo change. A lot I've seen, well, Facebook recently, right? They made that small little change to their logo. And then there's all these articles, because when Facebook does anything, there's all these articles about it. But this was like their Facebook logo changes over the years. And they've changed it a whole
Right.
bunch of times, but it's always been that little F, and they've just like slightly tweaked the color. I don't know if it's blue or
Yep.
purple. Maybe that keeps me guessing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's changed just enough that if someone points out that it's changed, I look at it, I'm like, okay, I guess that is a little bit different. But like you
Right.
said, very minimal over the years.
Minimal. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for sure, you will have to change your logo slightly, but there's a difference between making changes to a great logo that kind of lasts through the ages and having to rebrand where you're changing your logo itself often. That's not good design. You don't want that. You want, when you've got or you've paid for a good logo with the designer or you created one, you want to make sure that what that logo is lasts through time, right? Or as long as your business is around. And it's fine to change the shade of a color. It's fine to round corners or that kind of thing, like make those minimal changes. But that's not changing your logo. I see that so often where a company will, it's, like maybe a smaller company will pay for design, and it's like, oh gosh, like careful, because that may not last. And sure enough, in a couple years, they're feeling like they're out of date and they're having to have a new logo created. And you don't want that. You want that logo to stick in your audience's head, because otherwise, how will they know who you are if you keep changing your logo and that icon keeps changing? It's a huge pet peeve of mine when I see designers designing logos and giving them to people where you're like, that's never going to work. It's not going to last. You're going to be redesigning. You're going to be paying again to have that redesigned in just a few years. And the same applies if you're doing it yourself. Like if you go through this course and you learn how to do your own logo, you want to think about that stuff. You do not want to be creating a new logo in a year or 6 months or 4 or 5 years. You want the logo that you have to be able to stick it out for the long haul, for the length of your business, which hopefully is a very, very, very long time.
Yes.
So yes, so that's it. It's a great point and definitely something to think about when you're designing, for sure. So the next question that I would go through with my clients is, when considering someone to hire, what is the most important ideal or set of ideals for them to live up to? And one of the main things that I have clients come back and say to me is that, I'm small, I'm not planning on hiring anybody. That's just it's not going to happen. And I would say to them that, you know, brands are always built from the inside out, and that the people you hire should align in an authentic way to what your brand promises. And that even if you're not planning on hiring anyone, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I have seen so often little tiny Etsy shops or little tiny companies that thought that they weren't going to grow that big explode. And so I always stress to my clients that it is so important to think ahead. You know, I know a lot of people don't like to do it. I'm one of those people because I'm artistic and I like living in the moment, and I'm just wanting to design and not really think ahead. But you have to look ahead. And if you go ahead and do this in the early stages, if you get to that point where you actually have to hire people, you are not going to be hiring somebody that opposes your brand, right? And then that's going to make this process so much easier for your company, because the people that you hire, the people that you bring on, even if you're bringing them in to help you right now with small things and maybe they're not full time, they're representing who your brand is. So if you get somebody that's working in your Etsy shop who's answering questions for you and they're snarky and that's not what you want to portray, that's a problem. So you need to think about that. Now, if your shop offers something that's super sarcastic and funny, and you hire somebody that's super serious and is never going to be able to represent your brand in that way again, you're going to be in trouble. So you want to think about that. And that's all part of branding correctly, is thinking ahead and considering everything. And part of that is who you're going to hire, because for sure you don't want to hire somebody that is not going to represent your brand that we're putting all this time into well, because that can cause a lot of issues. So that's always something that I try to get my clients to think about too. And it also helps you to, you know, brand really well, because that's part of your voice. So if, as you're thinking about how you're going to create this logo and your brand as a whole, that's just part of it. You got to think about it. You can't not. You just have to. So, and then the next question that I would go into is, how do you see yourself and your shop or your business as better, different, or special than any other competing business? And this can be a hard one, because you might feel like you really don't stand out in the sea of competition around you, but I would stress to you that this could not be further from the truth. You're you, and there's no one else like you, and no one else can do what you do in the exact way that you do it. And if you do your research right, nobody's going to have the brand that you have. Nobody's going to have the logo that you have. So you need to think about that. How do you stand out from the competition? What is unique about your story? Because there for sure is something unique. Everybody does not have the same story. So you got to latch onto that and draw that out, so that you're right from the beginning, when you're starting off with the branding process, or maybe you're rebranding your shop and wanting to tell your story well, you got to think about that part. You want to stand out, and how is it that you're going to stand out? And again, there's not a perfect answer to this question, but that your unique story offers something to your customers that no one else can. So
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things with that is a lot of times we go back and forth, right? Like, we want to believe that we're unique, and then we want to feel that like we're just like the others. But if you think about it, like, who in your friend group is completely interchangeable and you're like, nope, already got one of you, like, so we've got duplicates here, one of you can go, right? Like, every one of your friends is your friend, and there's something special about them that even if you all have a lot in common, right? But you're still different, and you'd miss each one of them. No matter how many you have, they're each different.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly true. And I would say that especially for Etsy, this is very true, because there are several Etsy sellers who I have connected with on an emotional level that I keep going back over and over and over to their shops. 3 of them might all sell jewelry, and it might be pretty similar, but I've connected with all of them, and they each are offering me something unique, a little unique. Maybe if it's, maybe it might be similar, but it's unique enough from each other that I keep going back to those same people over and over and over. And so that's what I mean, I'm really passionate about that, because I hear Etsy sellers, and everybody in this webinar would know, you know, they're discouraged because they're like, I'm not unique. I'm in a sea of other people that are doing the same thing. And I would say, no, you're not. You just have to change your mindset. You got to start thinking about this differently. You have a unique story and you have to tell it. Nobody's going to tell it for you, and that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. So I would really hope that people would walk away knowing, hey, let's just change our mindset on that, because you do not have to blend in. And I know it can be discouraging, but it's just thinking differently and kind of drawing that out of yourself. So I think that's a huge thing for sellers to think about, for sure. Okay, and so then the next question that I would ask, similar to the one before it, but definitely not the same, is do you have a niche offering that other businesses don't offer? Okay, so maybe you have an actual product or something that you discovered that's totally different than anyone else. Then definitely you need to get that out there. Maybe it needs to be part of your tagline if it's super unique in your branding or your logo. So if there is something like you're offering that is really niche to everybody else, then you've got to think about that as well. And that actually, if it's unique enough, you may want to design around that. So it's definitely different from the previous question, but something to think about. And definitely patent your stuff if you've got something really unique, because I see that happen often where people don't patent their stuff, and it's kind of sad. Then somebody will come in behind them. And so then the next question I would ask is, if your brand, and this is really fun, I love this question, if your brand was a person, what adjective would you use to describe that person? So for example, would you say this person's confident, warm, friendly, thoughtful, sarcastic, genuine, funny, etc., etc., etc.? So start thinking about your brand and your story as a person, which will definitely reflect who you are, or maybe it doesn't. That's the really cool thing. I've seen people do this where, I'll get to know a seller and I'm thinking, yeah, this person is like probably going to be pretty hilarious and snarky, and come to find out they're actually pretty introverted and not like their brand at all, but the way they've represented it, they've kind of like disassociated themselves from it, as they've got, okay, this brand is completely different from me, but I'm going to run with that. And I think that's really cool, because a lot of times, it does reflect who you are, and there is nothing wrong with that either. It's just a different way to go about branding and having a business, which I love. I love both of those things. So I love the unique take on where you can go with it either way. So it's definitely something to think about, as far as, are you gonna take your brand and have your brand represent somebody that's not different from your values? That's not what I'm talking about, but just like personality wise, what does it represent, and is it going to be different from you? And maybe that's an outlet for you too, to be creative. So that's, just something really fun to think about as you're branding. And then the other thing too is with that, and I actually go into this more in the course, so you guys can check that out if you decide to buy the course, which I hope you do, because it's a lot of fun. But your brand and your brand personality, I go into how to create a mood board, which is all part of design as well, and doing the branding process. And so as you're thinking about who your brand is, and if your brand is more of your personality, or if you're going to have its own personality, we'd go into how to create your mood board, and your mood board is going to reflect whatever you've decided to make your brand personality as. So I go into that in the course, and so that's just something to start thinking about now. And I would tell my clients that as well, that we're going to create this mood board, and it's going to be the personality of your brand, whether that's completely 100% you, or we're doing something completely different personality wise with your brand. That's all connected. So that's another thing to start thinking about. And then the next question that I would go through is, if a customer that you have, past or present, were at a dinner party, what would they say about you to a friend? Which is also a very fun question. I always love to see what clients will say to this. So maybe they would say something like, they're super awesome, they're hilarious, they make me laugh all the time. And so maybe that your shop or your Etsy shop is offering something like greeting cards that are more tongue-in-cheek. This would be a perfect example of that. Or how someone would talk about your brand personality in a way that's saying like, oh, they're more dark and moody, and I don't really know a lot about them. They're kind of mysterious, but this is another great way to represent your shop. So it's just another way to kind of dive into the personality of your brand and what you're representing and all of that. I had a client recently who said that if they were at a table, or if a friend was at a table and having dinner with someone, they would say, man, I met that guy, and I'm just going to call him John. That's not actually his name. I met John, and boy, when I met him, he came up to me, he grabbed my hand, he looked me right in the eye and shook my hand, and I just knew from that point forward that I could trust him. And that was his answer to this question. And I was like, oh, that's a great thing to say. And that kind of lets me see more of what you're representing in your brand and, the design process. So it's pretty cool. And I love to see what clients will say, because it's definitely never the same and always very interesting for sure on what they come
It
back
definitely
with.
shows you, what he values and, how he wants to do business. And it's about integrity and honesty, looks in the eye. People look you in the eye. It's typically, people aren't going to look you in the eye if they're not being honest with you, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Yep.
well, that's cool. That's got to be really interesting for you to go through all these questions with all the different clients, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're probably surprised, and other times you're probably like, okay, what I know about you, like this
Oh,
is not actually surprising at all.
totally. Totally. It's always how it is. Yeah. Sometimes people will come back and I'm like, yeah, peg that. And sometimes I'm like, I had no idea. Completely shocked me. And I think that as people go through this process, if they're really taking their branding and their logo seriously, probably they will surprise themselves in ways too. Because I don't think you can go through, I mean, it's like any kind of personality or I don't know. I don't want to say therapy, but I guess in a way it could be pretty therapeutic. Stuff starts to come out that I think surprises us often, or at least it does. It has for me in the past when I've done similar exercises, and now being on the other side of the table and being like, oh man, like seeing what people give back to me, I can see how, yeah, it's always definitely unique what people send back. And it's just cool. I love that part of it. And also if you're, into being really reflect, if you will reflect on who you are, this is a great exercise for that too. It's a great growing exercise, I think.
Makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's all part of it anyway. So then the next question I would ask is, where do you see your business in 2 years or 5 years? And this just kind of harkens back to the fact that I always want people to think ahead. Don't think small. There's no reason why you should do that. And it is important for you to think, hey, where do I want my business in 2 years? And if you don't want to be full time on Etsy and that's not what you're looking for, fine. That's okay. But think about where you want to be. Don't just not think about it. Start thinking about this as a business. It's not just a hobby. I mean, I'm assuming if you're in this webinar, you're here because it's not just a hobby. So you got to start thinking ahead and thinking bigger and realizing that the minute you opened your Etsy shop, you opened a business, not just a hobby, if that's where you're taking it to, right? So you got to think ahead. And so that also helps me in the design process as well. Always. I will always want to know where they're going and what they're going to be doing. And thinking, okay, in 5 years, we're going to come back and we're going to review all this stuff and we're going to see if we need to make little tweaks like we were talking about earlier. Do we need to make little tiny tweaks to your logo? So yeah, that's all part of it. You got to think ahead. And then the next question I would go through is, what feeling do you want your customers to experience when they are engaging with you? Do you want them to be excited and feel welcome when they come into your shop or in contact with your brand? Or maybe you want them to feel they want to come and grab a cup of coffee and sit and stay a while with you and your brand or your shop. And I've definitely run into shops like this where, man, I can just sit there and just browse and browse and browse and just sit there drinking my coffee. And so if that's what you're looking for, you got to start thinking about that with your brand, with your photography, like the whole of your Etsy shop. It's something really important to think about, especially for Etsy sellers. How do you want to make your customers feel when they come across your store, or whether they come there directly? And that's all part of the story that you're telling as a whole with your brand. That's what you're communicating. And so it's important to start thinking about that too if you haven't. Hopefully you already have. But if you haven't, now's a good time, especially if you're getting ready to rebrand or do a brand new logo or brand. And
Hey,
then
Jade,
the
quick
next,
question.
oh yeah, yeah.
As people are going through these and they're writing down their answers to these questions, it seems like a lot of them could have multiple answers. And like,
Yep.
especially that one, I could see people wanting to write down like 10 things. Like, I want it to be awesome. I want it to be fun. I want it to be entertaining. Like, I want them to feel like it's trustworthy, you know, all these things. How many should they limit themselves to? Should they be really shooting for like one, like what is the top thing, or is it like top three or
I mean,
five? Like how many is too many?
I as a rule would say it would be a top of 5. I don't think, and I've been doing this for many years with clients, I don't think I've ever seen somebody come back with 10 answers. You know, even if they come back with 5 different ways to describe it, it's really, you can kind of distill it down to there's a main idea and that's what they're wanting to portray. But I mean, yeah, right. You can write down as many as you want to. If you want to write down 20 different things you want them to experience, but you know, they should be similar. I can't imagine that somebody would come back and say, well, you know, if they're offering something like, let's say for Halloween, that's more scary, that's not going to evoke like, you know, oh, I just feel so happy. I don't think anyway. So I think usually it's going to be similar. It might be several different words, but it should be similar. I have not had a client come back to me that's like with words that are so completely different from each other that I'm like, well, I don't really know what to do with this. So usually it's similar, you know, even if it is 20 different things. But you know, you don't have to put that many. I feel like in general people struggle to get 5 different things down or 5 different ways to describe how they want their customers to feel. But if you got more than that, sure, I'll write them down. I don't think there's a limit, but I would be shocked if it was so different that then they didn't know what to do with it. So yeah, I feel like it can be distilled down into one main thing that they're wanting their customers to feel. I feel like in general that's kind of how it is in shops. I've seen some pretty random shops that I'm like, what the heck is happening in here? What are you offering? Like, how are these products so unrelated to each other? But I feel like in general, the really good shops are very cohesive from their brand to their photography to their products, and that's what makes them very successful. So if you are offering so many different opposing items and products, I would say you might want to review that and maybe separate some of that stuff and possibly like separate some things out and maybe even open up a different shop. Because I feel like if as a consumer myself, if I was to go into a shop that was offering so many things that were like, what in the world is happening? Why do we have all these things in the shop? I would not stick around. So that's something for people to think about. Now, I'm highly visual, right? Because I'm an artist and a creative. So if I go into somebody's shop and the first thing I notice is that their branding's way off, it's not done well, their product photography is blurry, it's not awesome, I'm not going to stick around. Like, that makes me not they might have a really high quality product, but you know, if the rest of that stuff isn't done well, then it's kind of like, what's going on here? I don't know that I trust the seller. So yeah, it's got to be cohesive, and that includes branding and your products that you offer. So yes, that was a very long answer to that question, but
that's all right. That's a good answer. Thanks.
And then, so the last question that I would ask clients is, and this is what you guys want to think about as you start going through the branding process yourself and jump into designing a logo, is there anything you want to stay away from in terms of ideas or colors or a certain look? And as a designer, I have to ask that, because if I send a logo back and I've got 5 different mock-ups and they've all got some sort of shade of purple, and my client hates purple, but I didn't ask them, then I've just wasted my time. And so you want to think about that for yourself as well. Are there certain brands that you're like, I would never want that in my own brand? I don't like that color. I don't like that look. You need to think about that before you start your own process, because it is really interesting and funny how colors and things can kind of sneak into design when you actually didn't want them there. So just going ahead and thinking, hey, what do I really not want? And there may not be anything, there may be nothing you can think of, but it's definitely something to consider before you jump into actually designing a logo or a brand. So I would definitely ask them that. And it's usually the last question on my questionnaire, is what they want me to stay away from. Now, I have to tell you guys in this webinar, and you guys, I designed this course, and it's been a little, it's not an old course, it's very, very new. But since I designed the course and created it, I added 2 questions onto my questionnaire, and this has just been in like the last month, but I figured that I would go ahead and tell everybody in this webinar as well, because I still think that it's important. When you are designing your brand and you're thinking about your logo in particular, you want to think about if you want a tagline included in your logo design. So I've really started asking that, because it's interesting how people usually end up with some sort of little tagline, whether they use it constantly on their logo or not. And when I design, and I go through this in the course, you don't always have to have your tagline on your logo. You usually do 2 to 3 different versions of a logo where it's the same, but just the layout slightly different. But if there's the tagline you want to include, and maybe you haven't been including that in your shop, maybe you want to go ahead and do that now as you're starting the branding process, go ahead and think about that, because taglines can be gold. If you have a good tagline, that it can really stick in people's heads just as much as the image of your logo does. So that's something that I would ask right away now on my questionnaire. And then the other question I would ask, because we talked about audience, but it seems like I always have to end up adding this on with clients, is to describe their key demographic, which if you're already thinking about who your audience is, you should know who that is, but it just, I don't know, it just helps for people to think about it in that way as well. So that's the other question that I would cover on my questionnaire. So
it's one of those things I feel like is always worth revisiting, right?
Yeah,
because just
definitely.
like you said, you know, with who drinks Coke, like that changes.
Right.
New people are entering the market. Millennials didn't exist before when they were making the original stuff and the original marketing.
Right. Yeah, and there is a good example with the Coke thing is, you know, back in the day, all they did was offer Coke. Well, now they've got stuff like Life Water, and you can get Life Water with stevia, because maybe people don't want, you know, all the sugar or whatever. Maybe they don't like carbonation. And Coke, that's something else that they've done, and that's a Coke product. And so, yeah, you got to think about your demographic, and not only, you know, how your audience has changed, but the other thing too is maybe you're going to age with your audience, or maybe you're just going to keep changing enough that that new generation coming up is going to love you. So, I mean, ideally you'd want to do both of those things, but it might be that your demographic is totally changing. Again, that does not mean that you want to change your logo to fit your demographic. Every single time you got a new demographic, what you want to do is just, you know, change your brand itself, not the logo, to still reach that, whatever that new demographic is. So yeah, definitely something to think about. And it might be slightly redundant, but so worth thinking about again and answering again, just to make sure that you know who your audience and your demographic is. Because if you're marketing something that's probably not going to be bought by somebody that's 20 years old, but you're trying to push it to somebody that's 20, you either need to think about changing your product or changing your audience. One or the other. But I think people spin their wheels a lot, especially on Etsy doing that. They've got a product and they're trying to push it to the wrong audience, and then they're frustrated because they're not getting sales. And it's like, yeah, well, you got to think about your brand, and then you got to think about your audience and who you're trying to sell to. And that will take a lot of that frustration out, hopefully. There is not an answer to any of this that will magically make somebody have amazing sales overnight. That's just not a thing. So don't hear this as that, because that's not a thing. But it will definitely help.
Good to know.
So, yes. So that was it. That's the process that I walk through with my clients. And so if we want to open up questions, if anybody has any questions, we can definitely do that now.
All right. So yeah, put your questions in, and we'll do some Q&A here. Now, Jade, are you able to see a questions pane?
I am going to pull it up right now so I can see what is coming in. Okay. Okay, so I'm reading a question from Lynn, And Lynn said, it sounds like branding includes a logo and possibly a tagline. Most of us aren't as big as Coke or McDonald's, true. So adding to our story with ads, commercials, etc. isn't feasible. So how do we as small business owners develop our brand and add to the story we have created with the logo and tagline? Okay, Instagram. You need to get on Instagram and you need to be showing the behind the scenes on your brand and all of that there. That's a great way to do it. Also, shop updates. That's still a thing, right? They still able to do shop updates? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you guys need to do that. Just want to make sure Etsy hadn't changed in the last day. Do that. Show them who your brand is. Tell your story. The other thing you do not want to do is try to tell your entire brand story in your about section. So don't do that. Use Instagram is a fantastic way to market, and also use your shop updates. Let people see the behind the scenes. And I mean, even if you're branding now and you're going through that process, show that to people. Be relatable. If that's what you're trying to do with your brand, is be authentic and relatable, utilize those tools because it's free and it's a great way to do it. So yeah, you're not as big as Coke and McDonald's and all of that, and that's fine, but there's still plenty of ways that you can go about showing your brand and all of that on social media. I think you've got to use social media. It's an invaluable tool. As much as I hate it, it's like a love-hate relationship, but you got to use it. So I hope that
The other thing with McDonald's and Coke, I was gonna say the other thing with McDonald's and Coke are those are huge. They're huge companies with all this commercial and stuff, and everyone knows what those brands are. But everyone, including people that aren't their customers, right? People that don't remember the last time they've been to McDonald's still know what that is. And you as a small business don't need to go there. That's not what you're looking for. You just want your people to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that's a big part too, is you're not trying to just blanket the world with your message and be recognizable as people drive down the street. Oh, what are those golden arches? That's McDonald's. Wow, it's been years since I've been there. That's not helpful. That wouldn't be helpful to your brand. You want people that love it, and no matter how many things you sell, whether you might be known for one thing, which is great.
Yep, very true. That's absolutely true. It's all about knowing your audience and reaching them. You do not have to try to be global like McDonald's and Coke and all that. Although, going back to thinking ahead, if you decide to do that in the future, you can think about it, but you don't have to do it today. It's not something you got to try to, that would be overwhelming. So, okay, Valerie says, how do I do research on my target audience to find out more about how to reach them and speak their language? I'm targeting playful urban creatives. I would have to say Instagram again. If you're not wanting to do the ads and all of that, and you're researching your target audience, definitely get on Facebook and Instagram. Though I feel like Facebook has kind of moved more away from younger people and is now like our parents and I don't know, my 81-year-old grandma's on Facebook. So I feel like it's definitely kind of aged, but still, it's a great way to research your audience. I don't know, what do you I'm sure you guys have thoughts on how to research your target audience as well.
One of the things I would add is if you don't already have Google Analytics hooked up with your Etsy shops, that could be a good resource for you to add. Once you hook it in, you should be able to see demographic info for people who are currently visiting your shop. Now, that could be different than the demographics that you're trying to target and things like that, and you can always affect that with your branding and with your SEO and your keywords that you're using, obviously. But to kind of get a good read of where you are and who's visiting your shop now, you could hook in Google Analytics, and even if you have a standalone website on WooCommerce or Shopify or whatever, same sort of deal. See what you can hook into with them, probably Google Analytics again, to see demographic information for where you are today.
Yep. Yeah, and I would also add with the analytic thing that if you are on Instagram already and you have a business account, you can check out who is looking at your shop and which posts are engaging more people. I mean, I have to do that. That's part of my job for Marmalead, is that I create content and I stay up on all that stuff. And so just like with Google Analytics, you want to be checking in with your Instagram analytics as well, and see what all is going on behind the scenes, because that's your audience. That's who's looking at you and engaging with you. So.
And Facebook too.
And
so
Facebook
has
yeah.
one like Instagram does. If you have a page, I don't know how many likes, it has to be enough that it keeps data somewhat private, which is funny that Facebook would say that, but they only let you look at what else. So, they like your page, but what other interests do they have? It'll show you that too. So those are 3 good sources that are online to do that with. And then of course, if you sell things that are similar to what other, like, what other like brick and mortar stores maybe sell, you could always, walk around those stores, check out and see what type of people are frequenting it. And, if you sell something that you see people walk around and buy that's somewhat similar, you make something, your version of it, obviously, but just kind of take note, observe, and see, who are these people? What do they do?
Right.
What do they seem like? And build a story.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so Valerie also says, is it the same Valerie? Yes. What's your opinion on a consistent color story for vintage sellers? Color story. So I think you're talking about a color palette, maybe, for vintage sellers. I actually go into a lot of detail in my course about color palettes, because that's 100% part of branding. I don't think, Valerie, that I would have a specific color story or color palette. You can clarify for me what you mean by that if you want to. For vintage sellers, I think it's all very dependent on who you are and what your shop looks like as a whole, or what you're trying to make it look like. So I don't think I have a particular color I would think of, but I do go into colors and how to choose the right colors in my course. So there's a couple different lessons on colors, because I'm obsessed with colors. So definitely have a lot in there about that. Okay, let's see. Yes, okay. Again, oh yes, she said, like, should our storefront have a consistent color palette? Yes, yes, it should. You definitely want a consistent color palette. Yes, that is absolutely something you want to do. And like I said, I go into it in the course, but my rule of thumb is to choose 5 colors for a brand and a logo. That does not mean that the logo will have 5 colors, but the brand as a whole would have 5 signature colors, between 3 and 5. So yeah, you definitely want to stick with that, because that's going to give you that more clean, consistent look in your shop. And also your Instagram page should reflect that. If you've got a brand going on in your Etsy store, carry it through to all your Instagram, Facebook. I keep saying Instagram because I work on Instagram a lot, but that does not mean that that is the end all be all. Whatever social media platform, whether it's Pinterest or whatever that you're portraying your brand on, be consistent in your color palette, stick within your brand guidelines. And that's also part of having a brand, is having brand guidelines, which I talk about in my course as well. So you don't want to veer away from that. You don't want to all of a sudden throw in emerald green when you've been very muted. It just doesn't make sense. So, okay. So Laura says, if you're in the beginning stages of opening a business, how does developing your brand fit with your product line creation? Brand first and then tweak products? That's a great question. Okay, so I'm usually on the brand side of all of that, and usually, I don't know, what do you guys think? I feel like usually when I'm working with a client, they already have a product in mind, which is what we're creating the brand around. I don't know if I've had anybody come to me without some service or product already created. So I think usually you got to have a good idea of what you're offering before you brand and have a logo done.
Agreed. Yeah. I guess it depends, right? I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to answer that, because it depends. Like, is it a situation where, like, I know I want to start a business, but I don't know what I want to sell, but I know how that brand should make people feel. I'm in the same boat with you. Kind of some context. With me, it kind of goes together, right? Like, recognizing there's an opportunity, there's a need, and then to me, part of that includes what, an idea of how the brand should position itself in that market to be different.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I would say if you were sitting here and going through the questions as Jade was asking them, and you knew like right off the top of your head how you would answer all of those, and you could really well define exactly what you're wanting to build and what you want your brand to look like, and who, you already know who your target customer is for all of your products and stuff, you're probably more ready to do branding at this point. But I think if you're not there yet, if you're not sure about exactly what your niche is and how you're different from the competition, or exactly who your customer is going to be once you get your products out there, then it might make sense to kind of let those two things grow together. Let your store grow up as you're learning more about the branding and your positioning in your market and stuff like that.
right. Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
agreed.
I mean, if you were to make a shoe and you wanted to make sure, and you had the design of the shoe and you knew you're going to fit the market or like the actual need, right? So maybe it's like a shoe with better arch support or something like that, like some specific need that you don't feel is being addressed. But so you have that, but it's just very plain vanilla, nothing special about it. Then I could see, like, yeah, go through the brand part and figure out what you want your brand to be, so that whatever your brand is, the thing that's going to stick a long time, no matter what new shoes you make, you can put that design. Here we go. Here's the shoe. You can put that on the shoe, right? So now it's not the plain vanilla anymore. Now it just, it's covered in your brand in a good way. I don't just mean like, oh, your tagline, your logo, but like, like it fits. You see that and you're like, oh, that's that one. Like, I get it. That shoe goes back to that company and it makes me feel this particular way.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Sissy asks, more specific, is there a way to get some demographics on an Etsy shop's actual buyers?
You could ask your buyers. There's Etsy doesn't really share demographic information back. I'm not entirely sure if they do some of that with promoted listings data. Anyone here who's using promoted listings and is familiar with your promoted listing stats, you might be able to correct me in that space. I know they have additional information in there. I don't know if it includes demographic info. Etsy is pretty protective of shopper data and stuff like that, so that could be a tricky one. It's something you'd probably have to collect from customers on your own. If you do like craft shows or something where you're actually seeing people in person in addition to having an Etsy shop, that's a good opportunity because you can see exactly who's walking up to your booth and other booths that are similar to yours.
And Etsy's really, they would be, even if, I mean, they're taking guesses also at the demographics. It's not like we fill out full profiles for Etsy when shopping on there. That, like, think about when you shopped on Etsy, like they don't have just like a ton of information about who you are, kind of like Facebook does.
Yeah. Okay, Valerie said, for a mood board, is Pinterest okay, or do you recommend a mood board app? Valerie, you can do this on Canva, and I go into it in my course about how to create a mood board on Canva. But there are lots of different ways you can create a mood board. I'm trying to think. Pinterest, sure. Pinterest is a great way, but I feel like when you're creating a mood board, you're wanting to get all the pictures in one place so you can see it all together and make sure it's cohesive. And I go into like creating a color palette with your mood board. And so you can do that in Canva. So yeah, you can hop on Canva. If you decide to get the course, I go through all of that and how to do it there. And again, Canva's free. So I think they have a paid version. I'm pretty sure they do, but free version's great unless you're a designer. I think anyway. Somebody said, can we have your Instagram account name? Yes. Are you talking about my account or Marmalead's? Because Marmalead's just Marmalade. My Instagram account, you can have that. It's C Jade Design. That's it. So C is in Charlie, Jade Design. So that is my Instagram account. Would love to have you guys check it out. I'm on Instagram a lot. So if you want to interact with me, I am on Marmaleads just as much as my own. So come on over. We would love some interaction. Somebody said, okay, I'm new to Instagram. This is Marion. just figuring it out. Is there a source of how to start marketing my shop on Instagram?
There are too many sources.
Can I recommend one I know is really good? Am I allowed to do that? Can I recommend
What's
someone?
that? No, go for it.
Okay, so they're not affiliated with us at all, but there is, you could check her out, Marion. Her name is Jasmine Star. You can check out Jasmine Star on Instagram, but she has a company called Social Curators, and I actually am a member of Social Curators. And I would say if you want the 411 on Instagram, check her out. Gordon is right. There are a bazillion Instagram, I don't know what you call them, like pros, and they'll teach you how to use Instagram. Jasmine's just who I went with because she was recommended by a designer that I really admire and trust 100%. And so that's how I came into contact with Jasmine and her company. I think so far she's been awesome, and everything she's offered has been well worth the money. So that's what I can recommend to you personally. I have not tried anyone else out. I also know that Hillary Rushford is another really great gal that has currently started a podcast and is an Instagram guru, along with Jenna Kutcher. So those are the three I'm going to name drop, but definitely Jasmine Star is at the top of my list because I actually use her product. The other two gals, I just consume their free stuff, like their podcasts and their Facebook groups and their Instagram. So Google it. There's a lot of free information about Instagram. So thanks so much for the helpful info. Thank you, Valerie. We loved having you here. Okay, I don't know how to say this name. I'm probably going to butcher it. Haya? I'm really sorry, I don't know how to say your name. How can we identify the design base of the logo if our brand needs a text-based logo or icon-based? How can we design the base according to our brand voice? That's a great question. You know, I have actually never had anybody ask me that. That's a great question. Now I'm going to have to think about that here for a second. So when I'm going through the design process with a client, normally what I do is I design between 3 and 5 mock-ups, which probably will end up being 8 or 10, probably more. They probably won't see a lot of those, but I don't think that there is a black and white answer to this, because when I'm doing a mock-up for a client, what I try to do is offer at least 2 to 3 logos that have an icon available with them, and then I always end up doing a couple that are font based. So I don't know how to answer this for you specifically. I think it's something that as you're going through the design process, you're just going to have to feel out and go with your gut for your brand and your shop. If you are trying to, you know, like Coke, they're a font-based logo. It sticks really well in everybody's head, but like McDonald's, they've got an icon. Yeah, so is Etsy. But like McDonald's and other brands, they have that signature icon. So it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You don't want to use a font that's boring. You have to do something kind of creative with your font, I think, to make it stick. So yeah, that's my answer, is that you just go through this process, go through the design process, go through the course, and then see what you think once you start that process for yourself and once you start designing. That's the thing about designing. If you're not a designer, if you've never done it before, which if you're into it and you want to learn more about it, that's awesome. I'm super excited for you, because as a designer, stuff changes. Like, I cannot say to a client, I am 100% going to give you a font-based logo, because they might get it and not feel like that's the right one for their brand. You just don't know until you get into going through the design process and see how things change. And they definitely change, for sure. Because even when, like with my clients, once I give them mock-ups, that's the easy part. Then we got to go back and forth about, you know, refining the logo. I've had one time in my design career where I sent a logo and the client was like, this is perfect, don't change it, I want this one. And that's like my unicorn. That's my amazing unicorn that I got. Yeah, because it's just, you know, as a designer, of course, I go through this process that we just walked through in the webinar, so that when I get into the actual design process, it cuts down on that back and forth time, because I'm not that person. So what I like might be slightly different from what they like. So I might put a color in their logo. They're like, ah, I thought I would like that, but I don't. So we got to go back to the drawing board with that. So yeah, I would just say you got to get into it and see where it goes.
Makes
So, yeah.
sense. I was just thinking about Pepsi because you're talking about Coke, and yeah, Coca-Cola completely text-based logo, and then Pepsi used to have, because they've got the little circle and the red on top, blue on the bottom.
Right, the
So
blue,
they
yeah.
used to have Pepsi right in the middle of it. So for a long time, apparently, but then they took the text out of it. They still have the logo, but they take the text and they put it down below, but they don't always show up together. So they've
Right,
made just their non-text logo more recognizable, much like McDonald's. You typically see the golden arches and McDonald's, but
yep,
now they're recognizable without it.
right,
And
yep.
one benefit I could see to that is, especially when you're looking at little favicons and browsers and whatnot, right? Like when things get shrunk real down,
Yeah,
if you tried to put the normal Pepsi with the text in there,
it'd be
or
hard.
right, or if they had an app, they probably do have an app. They probably have so many apps. Who knows how many apps they have on your phone? But when you have those little icons too, if you have something text, right, it's going to get shrunk real down, and then it's going to be harder and harder to
Right.
read on that device.
I will say, just along those lines, that as you are going about designing your logo and starting all of this, as a rule for myself as a designer, when I'm designing, I think it's really important to try to do a removable piece of that logo, whether it's font or, if you have an icon, great, that's going to be removable for that very reason, Richie, because what you're talking about is actually really important, where you can see the little logo here and there where it's that little icon. When
Yes.
I do font-based logos, I will try to do something unique, maybe with the first, if it's 2 words, maybe the first letter of each word, where it can be removed and used as a branding piece. It's really important for me as a designer to do that for my clients. Like, I want one piece to be able to be removed, so they can brand with it, so that they have both. It's not always possible, but I really try to do that. And the other thing, and this is just a little extra little tip from me as a designer, when you're doing your logo, make sure, if you can, again, I just feel like it's not great design if you can't do this. You want to be able to switch your logo to a black and white logo if you ever need it. So if you have a logo like Marmalead's, great design, Gordon, because you can take that logo and you can switch it to, if we have something like that's black, you can make the logo white and it doesn't take away from the logo. Everybody still knows what the logo is because it's clear, because it was designed well, and it can be switched as far as making it black or white. Not going to change the color of it usually. You don't really want to do that to like some random color. Like, I'm not going to make Marmalead's logo lavender. I'm either it's gonna be orange and yellow, or it's gonna be either white or black, depending on what I'm putting it on. So I just feel like that's a good tip as you're starting your logo design process. Remember that if it cannot be switched to black and white, you might want to rethink it a little bit. So you might have some thoughts on that, Gordon, because I know you've done a lot of design.
I do, and I love that you mentioned that because that's one of my pet peeves too, is when you see some of these like very creative logos out there that have like cool color gradients or something like that, where it blends from one color to
Yeah.
another, and that's like a core part of the logo, and you realize like, wait, I can never print this in just black and white. It wouldn't work. If it has grayscale, fine, but just to do black and white with it, it's not gonna fly. And
Yeah.
it's more and more people are doing that, I think, because more and more stuff is web-based now, and I think the black and white really is helpful when you're doing something that's like print material.
Yes.
But I think just for readability, you really want something that's clear and simple and doesn't require a lot of complexity in order to be able to read what the logo is actually trying to say.
Yeah, I will say that I just did a logo recently where the little icon that I used, oh my word, it had like 4 different gradients. It was a ball and it like came up, and so it had like 4 little, almost looked like petals, but it had a different gradient on each one of those. And I really, by the end of that, was like, what have I done? Because that's what the client wanted. And so I had to go back in and create a grayscale for each one of those, which was a pain in the butt, and explain to them, like, you're never going to be able to make this icon just black or white. So just be aware of that before we do all this. So it's just, you got to kind of make that call too, and talk it through with your client if it's a client that you're doing this for. But yeah, I agree. The more simple, the better, and for readability as well. So I think we've covered all of the questions. Unless anybody has any more that we haven't gotten. We do have a gift to send everybody. Do I send that in the chat? How does that work?
Yeah, post it in the chat. That's probably the best place.
Okay. So for those of you who stuck it out with us through the questions, I'm sending you your gift right now, and it's actually a PDF of all of the questions that we went through, plus the 2 bonus questions that I added on at the end, so that you guys have it in a printable format and you guys can go through it yourself, and you don't have to try to scramble around remembering what I said. So that's gonna come your way here in just a second. There we go. Did it go? Do you guys see it?
Let me take a look. No.
I don't see it yet.
You put it in the chat, and did you put all entire audience?
Yep. Or maybe I need to. Do you have it, Gordon? You want to send it over? Sorry, guys. This is actually my first webinar on this platform, so I'm not sure.
I cannot post to the entire audience. I can only post to organizers and presenters.
Got it.
Richie got it.
I just posted it. Okay, excellent. There we go.
See it, but is it clickable? Somebody said, do we see it now? Can they click it?
Yep, mine's clickable, and I'm in the GoToWebinar interface. If it's not clickable, you can always probably just highlight it and copy paste it into your browser.
Got it, Shannon says. Perfect.
Okay, great.
Awesome. All right. And we will be sending a follow-up email, right, guys, with the replay if they want it.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
some fun behind-the-scenes stuff for you guys as well. So be looking out for that email.
That's right.
Because on my end, I have some fun behind-the-scenes things to show you guys.
Yes, you do.
Yes.
And also, Jade, where can they get your course and what's in this course?
Oh, right. Yes, we got to send them the course. So the course goes through the design process on how to design a logo in Canva in detail, plus how to make your shop look very cohesive with your brand. And it also has a bonus video, and it goes into color palettes and where I go to find all my cool, fun tools with all the colors that you could ever want possible, which is awesome. I'm obsessed with colors and fonts. So yeah, it goes into detail. I'm going to walk you through in each of those videos how to design a couple different sort of logos on Canva, and you will not be left in the dark and trying to figure it out all by yourself on Canva, because I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So you can have my video up and you can be walking through it on your own as the video is going. And I go through, yeah, a whole bunch of stuff on design. So if you are interested in rebranding or creating a new brand and logo, or you're getting into design, this is the course for you. And I'm really excited to have you guys check it out. So that logo, I can't send anything. You want to send it, Richie?
Yes, I just sent it.
Awesome. Cool. Yep. Okay. I look a little bit different in the course because I'm notorious for changing my hair, but it is actually me. So it's just different hairstyle. Because I'm an artist, so I can't keep the same hairstyle very often. So
keeps it fresh. I like it.
Keeps it fresh and exciting. And yeah, again, if you guys want to check out Marmalead's Instagram, it's just get on Instagram and look up Marmalead, and then my Instagram handle is CJadeDesign. So feel free. Come on and say hi on either platform. We love having our people show up on Marmalead. We love our community on Instagram. So come on over.
Yes. Yeah, show up, leave some comments, start a conversation.
Yep, totally. I'm down for that. And I think that that's it. We've got a lot of people stick around. So thanks, guys. This was awesome.
This was great. Jade, thank you so much for going through that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to come out from behind the scenes. I'm around Marmalead's, business a lot, but not usually on the front end. So it's fun to step out of the shadows.
Even though like everything you do ends up on the front end.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually an introvert, so that's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm gonna crawl back into my design hole now once this is over.
Yeah. I understand. But we appreciate it when you come out of that hole.
Yes. Well, it's good for me too.
Yes, it is. Very good. All right. So I'm seeing a whole bunch of thank yous. Looks like everyone had a great time, and that is awesome. I know I certainly did. And we are going to send out an email with the replay. We'll probably throw that up on YouTube for replay there, or the link to that. Throw a link to the course again in there. But of course can find that at marmalead.teachable.com also. So even though I put it in here, I figure I might as well verbally say it as well. But yeah, that should wrap it up. So thank you so much, Jade.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And I never actually remember how to stop the webinar. Do you happen to have the button for that?